So to start driving the conversation, this is how the study, or how Microsoft and IDC, after conducting the interviews and the study, this is how we classify the 5 elements of consumer trust. From a consumer perspective, we think about, when I interact with an organization, we'll think about privacy and how the organization will handle my information, and then my information is going to be used to exactly what I agree to the organization. Security, how this information stays secure against the threats of cyber attacks, of course. Reliability, is this service going to be consistent? Is it going to be minor disruptions? Is it going to be reliable? Ethics, is the data gathered from my use of the service going to be done on an ethical basis? It's going to be done to the purpose I'm agreeing to, linked to the privacy before. And last but not least, is the service or product I'm buying compliant to the industry and statutory regulations of the country? Very important. Those are all important questions that you hopefully will see addressed in the study, and Randy will take us through. I want to finish with one more concept here, and it's the concept of AI and trust on AI. We all know that AI is a pervasive technology, and it's becoming more and more essential part of all these online transactions that we perform in one way to another. We at Microsoft believe that to harness the power of this technology, it won't be only about the function of a technological advancement. It will also be a very, very important function of how much customers are going to trust this technology, and we're going to trust the organizations making use of the technology to deliver those online services. So I hope that serves as a good frame for the discussion that we're going to start right now. And I think with that, I'm going to introduce Mr. Randy. Please join us on stage to take us through the study. Thanks.
Thanks, Andres. So let's now get into the meat of the survey, some of which now you know as well as I do, as we went through the game in the very beginning, and what some of the results are. But so Microsoft has commissioned IDC to run this survey early in the year, specifically around digital trust and AI. 14 countries in Asia were included in this survey. Over 6,300 people participated around the region. In the Philippines specifically, we had 454 respondents. As Ian and Andres both said, this is very much focused on consumers and the consumer sentiment around their level of trust of the digital services that they're using online today, the kinds of services that they're using, who they expect, who they have the most trust in different kinds of industries as well. So in terms of age, it's very hard to see, but we looked at Gen X, Y, Z, and baby boomers, those 4 groups in terms of age. You can see the split here, almost equal. We have a little bit, Gen X and Y were a little bit larger at 30% than the baby boomers and the Gen Z at 20% each. Gender-wise, it was pretty much split 50-50, a little bit more on the male side in terms of the respondents in the Philippines. And this is a consumer study, so we're very much focused on the consumer sentiment, but just to give you an idea of the type of people that responded, you can see here the kind of level of jobs and positions that they hold inside the Philippines. And then lastly, when we asked questions about how they feel about digital trust, we wanted to get their feel on what their expectations were in terms of different industries. So here are the industries we asked about in terms of the level of trust people have when we think about these different industries as well. And manufacturing, FSI is financial service institutions, retail, education, healthcare, government, automobile, and telco media. So those are the big industries that we asked about in terms of the level of trust. So let's dig in. That's a little bit of background on the study. Let's dig into some of the questions now. So one of the really important qualifiers, of course, for the survey was that we wanted to find people that actually have experience actually using digital services. So one of the requirements was, in order to respond to the survey, you had to use at least one of these digital services within the last 90 days. So we only included people that have actually been using digital services. So what I'll do on each of these slides is although it's very difficult to read, but I'll read the question and then we'll go through the responses on each of these slides. So here, how many times have you performed the following activities in the past 3 months? So first is banking, online purchase, social media, payments, service purchase, app store, and government. So of these different categories, number 1 in the Philippines is social media. No surprise there. Huge usage of social media in the Philippines, as we know, and a very young population as well. Clearly this is driving this. And by the way, the blue is the Asia Pacific region as a whole response. The green is the Philippines specifically, so that you can compare the Philippines with the rest of the region. But a little bit higher in social media in the Philippines. Online purchases number 2, and then services is number 3. But one of the really interesting things to point out here as well, which was one of the questions in the game, is on the banking transactions. So as a whole in the region, the Philippines is less than half in terms of the usage of banking transactions online. And again, a couple of reasons. I think probably the biggest driver here is the fact that there's such low penetration of people with bank accounts in the Philippines. I think the number is 34% of Filipinos actually have a bank account, which is one of the reasons why you see some of the other sort of digital payment platforms taking off as well as they are. That's one of the big differences from the Philippines. The next question, from the following 5 attributes, and these are the same attributes that Andres just talked about, from these 5 attributes of trust, can you see which ones are more important to you in determining whether or not you trust digital relationship with the organization? So which is most important to you? So the bottom line on this slide is when the respondents looked at responding to this particular question, the bottom line is each of these 5 elements are just as important to them at 90% or higher. So a couple of things on this slide, you can see it's almost 90% or higher in terms of what are these important. Not just privacy and security, but also compliance and ethics is just as important. And as you can see on each of these questions as well, the Philippines is actually higher than the region as a whole. So the importance level that the Philippines put on each of these elements is higher than the average in the region as a whole. So now we start to look at some of the different industries and the trust expectations around the industries. So this question is on a scale of 1 to 5. How much do you believe that the digital services from these organizations will treat your information in a trustworthy manner? So basically, what's your expectation in terms of trust when you think about these different industries? So the top 3 in the Philippines are financial services institutions, followed by education and healthcare, and pretty much lines up with the region as a whole, as you can see here. But it makes sense as well, right? Your banking, your education, your healthcare, a lot of data being stored in all these places, particularly in the banking and healthcare. So the expectation is that that information is held, is secure, that is private, etc. Okay, so the next question around the preference for platforms. So this is really interesting. So on a scale of 1 to 5, how much would you prefer to transact with a service provider that either provides a digital platform with less trust but at a lower cost, or a digital platform that has a higher cost but provides a much higher level of trust in the platform? So as you can see, 70% of the respondents said that they would be willing to pay more on a platform that they know will give them a higher level of trust. And on the other end, only 6% said that they would be willing to stay with a platform and pay less, although they would, by the way of accepting a lower level of trust from that organization. And again, we compared to the region about the same in terms of the costing here, but more people in the Philippines would be willing to pay that higher price to make sure that they're getting that higher level of digital trust. So this is about recommending these different platforms to others. So the question is, how much would you recommend a business that how much would you recommend a business that has a trusted digital platform to others, even if its cost is higher? So 73% here are saying that they would recommend to others a digital platform that, again, was more expensive, but they knew was offering a higher level of trust. So anyway, so I think this is one of those big aha data points that comes out of the study, is that people, now we know that security and trust for them is so important that they're willing to pay more to get that guarantee of trust, right? Next question. On a scale of 1 to 5, how much do you believe the digital services from these organizations will treat your information in a trustworthy manner? So on this one, only 40, so it's quite low actually, to be honest, right? The responses here are very low. Only 44% of the people in the Philippines feel like these companies have the trust level that these companies will actually treat their information with security and privacy, which is actually higher than the region as a whole, which is almost only 1/3 of the respondents in the region. So we're a little bit higher in the Philippines. Is still less than half of the people believe that these institutions are actually doing a good job at protecting their data. This question, in the context of a digital relationship, have you ever had a negative experience that made you stop using an organization's digital service? So have you ever had an issue with these 5 elements of trust that we're talking about? Have you ever had an issue with one of the institutions that has caused you to stop using that institution's service? So in the Philippines, it's about the same as the region, but so 44% of the respondents have had the experience where they've actually left a service because they had some issue with that company, some breach of trust or with compliance or with privacy or protection or something like that. So the next question is, if you said yes to this, so if you have actually left a digital service because of some issue, how would you describe using those 5 attributes? What caused you to stop using the service? So when you left, what was the main driver of leaving? So the top 3 in the Philippines is, number 1 is reliability. Reliability means, was the service up all the time? Was it there when you needed it? Did it do what you wanted it to do? And then number 2 is security. There's a security issue, and number 3 is privacy. So they had some issue related to either security of their data or privacy of their data that forced them to leave that company and leave that service. Next question, what will you do when you leave what will you do when you have a negative experience with the digital service organization? So this is, if you do have a negative experience, how will you react to that? So in the Philippines, 57% said that they would replace that service with another company. So they'll continue to use a similar service, but they would leave and go to another company. And 11% that said they would stop using that service entirely. Not even find a replacement company, but just stop using that service entirely. So almost 60% of the people will leave a company if they have an issue like this. So as an organization now, you can just see this and start to think, okay, so if I have a single issue around privacy, security, reliability, compliance, ethics, I could potentially lose over half of my customers if I have one single incident with that customer, in terms of that service. So it has a huge impact, potentially a huge impact on anybody that's providing a digital service, because now we know that over half of them will leave you and go to a competitor where they feel there's more trust, and 11% will just stop using that service altogether and not even look for a replacement. So I guess if you total these up, the 57 and 11, that's 68%. So 2/3 of the customers will leave you if you have a single incident in terms of breaching one of these 5 trust elements. Okay, so now we're going to have a few slides to talk about AI. Andres introduced the concept, but at IDC, we think that AI is going to have a huge impact on digital services, even for consumers. AI is now going to make more services more accessible to customers, make them more productive, make them easier to use. In fact, we've actually predicted that this year in 2019, we believe that 40% of the transformation projects that are happening will have some element of AI in them. So within an organization, if they're going through some digital transformation exercise, 40% of that will include some AI, which means that AI is going to now impact the services that company is providing. So it's actually going to have a huge impact on the types of services that are going to be available and who's going to be using them as well. So let's talk a little bit about AI. So this is one of the game questions as well, but the awareness level of AI in the Philippines. So have you heard anything about AI or artificial intelligence? And 89% have, only 11% say that they've never heard anything about AI. The vast majority of those people are hearing it through the media. Which of these statements do you most directly identify with? So how do you feel about AI in general? And this is very consistent in some of the other studies that we've done as well around AI, and frankly even some other sort of emerging technologies in the Philippines. Is on average the optimism. So 57% of the people in the Philippines feel optimistic about AI and the value that it can actually bring to their lives, which is higher, as you can see, is much higher than the average across the region as well. And again, very consistent with the feeling that we get from Filipinos with a lot of emerging technologies. They immediately see the value of some of these technologies and what it can bring to them. 22% are ambivalent, don't feel one way or the other. 18% are skeptical, and then just 4% are pessimistic. But the good news is that more than half are optimistic about the impact AI can have for them. How do you think AI will impact your role in the next 5 years? So the bottom line here is that most of the people in the Philippines feel like it's going to make their life better. It's going to take away some of the repetitive tasks that they may be doing today, and it will augment their work, not replace them completely, but actually help them in their job, help them do their job better, and augment their work, and almost act as a co-worker, if you will, doing their job with them today, which they feel like opens them up, allows them to now focus on more important value-added activities, as AI can take more of the repetitive kind of tasks away from them. So 83% in general feel like AI will have a positive impact. How much do you trust these organizations to harness the power of AI to improve how we live, work, and play? So the level of trust in the Philippines relative to AI and which institutions they feel like they have the most trust in. There's a little bit of difference here in the Philippines versus the region, where in the Philippines education is number one. They have a high level of trust in the educational system to use AI in the right way. Number two is the financial services institution. And then number three is telecom and media, which is very different from the region as a whole. As you can see, healthcare actually was in the top 3 in the region, and telecom and media was number 5. At least in the Philippines, telecom and media snuck into the top 3 of the list. I have my own opinions on why that might be, but that wasn't in the study, so we'll just talk about what the data is saying here in the Philippines. Okay. So I think that's it for me. Yeah? Do you want to introduce Bon, or should we just have Bon come up? Okay. Thank you.